all your stuff. What can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Well, hey, Claire, how you doing?
Hi, Teresa. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Hello, everybody. This is the podcast It Chooses You, and this is the Smidgen dish.
That's short for Smidgen Edition.
Yes.
Which is our name for a little bite of pop culture here for you on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've been good all week. You've worked hard. You're tired. Let us bring you something that delights you.
Yes.
In a wild turn of events, this week we're bringing you a show that's actually on and unfolding right now. We're bringing you relevance this week.
For the first time in many, many weeks, we're actually talking about pop culture, not just culture. This is a thing that's happening right now, you guys. It's so exciting.
This week we are talking about the ongoing series, Only Murders in the Building. I have been watching this show since it started, but you had not been, Teresa, and I asked you to watch at least a couple episodes to bring you somewhat up to speed so we could have a riveting discussion of this show. Only Murders in the Building is a series on Hulu starring Selena Gomez, Steve Martin, and Martin Short as three neighbors in a very posh apartment building in New York who get sucked into investigating a murder in their building and making a podcast about it. So already for us, inherent comedy.
Yes.
There will obviously be some minor spoilers for the first few episodes, so beware. If you haven't seen it, watch Only Murders in the Building on Hulu and come back to us and listen then so that you can truly enjoy and not be spoiled for the series. Or maybe you don't care and you like spoilers. Sometimes Teresa likes spoilers.
Maybe you're on Team Teresa and you don't care about spoilers and you're fine with knowing what happens because plot points that's not what do it for you. In which case, welcome.
Teresa, what did you think?
I liked it very much. It was darker than I expected. Darker meaning sadder than I expected, but in a very nice way. I mean, it's talking about murder, so of course, I don't know why I didn't expect it to be as sad as it is, but it is, and it's lovely. And it's super weird. There's some weird stuff in it that I really like, which I'm sure you'll talk about. But yes, I'm grateful that you told me about it, and I will continue watching.
One thing I love about this series is that the three central characters who have nothing in common except that they live in this building. Their building's called the Arconia, and it's one of those New York apartment buildings, meaning very fancy, historical, seems to have been there forever, and at least in this day and age, only extremely wealthy people could possibly live there. Mm-hmm. So they have nothing in common except that they live in this building, but they come together because they are all three obsessed with a true crime podcast, hosted by Cinda Canning, who is played by the wonderful Tina Fey. Their coming together over this obsession of the podcast is so well justified in that New York way of everybody ignoring each other until they find some common ground. And then it's just on. There's
a fire alarm in their building, and they all have to leave their building. And they are all gathering at a bar next door, waiting to be allowed back in their houses, basically. And they had all just started listening to the new episode. And so they're interrupted in listening to this new episode, and they have to go to a new place. And then they all realize that they were listening to that episode, and they have to know, what did Bo have in his mouth? Exquisite.
It's so good. The characters are Charles Hayden Savage, a washed-up former television star, played by Steve Martin. There's Selena Gomez's character, Mabel Mora, a mysterious young woman with a secret connection to the murder victim. And then there's Oliver Putnam, played by Martin Short. He's an out-of-work theater director, financially struggling. And for me, Martin Short can be a lot sometimes.
Yeah. That's actually this perfect bio. Martin Short can be a lot sometimes.
But he's really great in this because I think Martin Short's instincts are right on, and he's just a little bit more understated, so he fits within the world, right? Like if he were over the top, he wouldn't quite fit in the world. And he's fantastic in this. So these three bond right as another resident, Tim Kono, dies. It turns out that the death has occurred during this fire alarm. The death seems to be a suicide, but the three are convinced that it's murder, and they decide to investigate. And the way that they get embroiled in this, as I've said, because their choice to look into this murder it's immediately previously justified by their love of this true crime podcast. It just feels very natural, and it works really well.
You and I have listened to a few different true crime podcasts in the past. There's a moment where the police are still looking at Tim Kona's body in his apartment, and they come up, and the police detective has zero time, like, fucking true crime.
That character's Detective Williams, played by Divine Joy Randolph, and she's fantastic. She comes in more later as well.
Yeah, she has zero time for their bullshit.
She says fucking true crime numbnuts. I love that moment because it's gotta, cops and especially detectives have got to actually be driven crazy by this in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
This is a spoiler, and it's going to be a spoiler for you, Teresa. But there is a point in the series in which Sting becomes a major suspect in the murder.
Oh my god.
The singer of the police, Sting.
Okay.
And the fact that Sting is willing to play himself as a murder suspect, and frankly, a real fucking piece of work and a dick, makes me have a new level of respect for Sting that I did not have heretofore.
All right.
The show is beautifully filmed.
Mm-hmm.
The lighting in particular, I noticed on second viewing, is fabulous. There are lots of dark corners and subtle lighting. And if you're into sconces, you are going to fucking love this show.
For you sconce heads out there, there's a lot of ground to cover in this series.
The characters are often shown in a bit of shadow with light behind them, or there will be a hallway shot with a series of lights running off screen. The lighting is important because it reflects the theme of what's hidden and what's revealed, which is a perfect theme for a murder story. Mm-hmm. That theme runs through the series. There's this idea of who we present ourselves to be versus who we are. So, for example, in that first episode, Martin Short's character's going on about all the potential shows he's working on. He's sort of presenting this image of being overworked and in the flow and just a mover and shaker. And then we realize by the end of the episode, he hasn't had work in a really long time, and he actually has to go to his own son and ask to borrow money.
Again.
That's the worst part.
Yeah.
Everyone's got secrets in this show. And the show has the confidence to let you sit with these small mysteries for a bit. Again, in the first episode, it's things like, why is Steve Martin cooking and throwing away an omelet over and over again?
Mm-hmm.
It rests in that. It's like, it trusts the audience. Look, you all are smart enough to know we're going to address this, but here's just a little thing. Because we're dealing with where people live, there's a real play within the series on the public versus the private. I realized that the moment that Steve Martin is invited into Selena Gomez's apartment really thrilled me. Because we've gotten these glimpses of her and her life and kind of a rough space, which is really intriguing. And we hope by getting in her apartment, we'll learn more about her. So it's really thrilling. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of a voyeurism for us as the audience. There's a lot of scenes set in someone's private space. Mm-hmm. The show creates these mysteries and then eventually opens the door for us and lets us in.
I really like the combination of real feelings and ridiculous details, because that to me is exactly what life is. It's like, here when we're having these things, and then also I'm cooking an omelet every day and throwing it away. And that's just the thing I do. It starts very early, as you said. I don't think you said it exactly this way, but by the second episode, I was like, okay, who is being real and when, and who is lying and when, and what are they lying about and why? And it's the most fun to have those questions and be watching a show that you trust to actually answer them. As we've discussed a few times in the past, my level of trust, the level of trust I can bring for a piece of television, was severely damaged by my relationship with Game of Thrones. And so it's very nice to be watching a series where I'm like, no, I think these writers actually know what's happening. And this is going to be incredibly good. I can just let this happen.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about that sense of trust as I reflected on the show. I do trust them, and I asked myself why, and I think it is because it's such confident and quality storytelling. Mm. I trust the actors, I trust the designers, I trust the directors and the writers. Steve Martin created the show along with a man named John Hoffman.
Okay.
There's just something in the actual unfolding of the story that contains an inherent confidence.
Yeah. Well, and by the point that I had collected a number of questions, they brought back in the reference to the Au Clair de la Lune dance piece that we had seen at the start. They got into the apartment and got the package and found the ring. So at that point, they had like the next clue, and each of them sort of did a fall down and a bounce back up onto the staircase. in an environment that showed you what was most important to them. So Martin Short had just left his son's house. He was outside of his son's house. So his family relationship is the thing for him. That is where he reacted to that news. Steve Martin dropped the omelet pan and it picked it back up. So that's something that's very significant for him. And when Selena Gomez's character dropped the ring and it bounced back up, I was like, why is it the ring for her?
Well, I think the answer comes when it flashes out to the photo of her with her Hardy Boys, and then the reveal is that she knows Tim Kono, the murder victim. So I think the ring represents her relationship to him and to that time in her life. That's explored a little bit in further episodes.
But just having that be the callback, I was like, weird, they're actually showing part of this dance piece. Okay. And then it came back in such a lovely way. I was like, oh, it's actually really good and beautiful. That's really wonderful. The thing I want to close with for me is 3 of my favorite quotes.
Great.
I guess old white guys are only afraid of colon cancer and societal change. Our victim is less likable than a dead cat. And don't fuck with me, Oliver. I can't imagine anything less pleasant.
I think Selena Gomez is delightful in this series. I am a latecomer to being a fan of hers, but she did a series called Selena and the Chef on HBO during quarantine, where chefs would basically Skype in or call in and teach her how to cook, and she doesn't know how to cook, but she loves food. She's so goofy. And definitely more on the dry side as a performer in this series, Only Murders in the Building. But she's just continually unfolding for me. Such a well-written character, and she performs so well in the series. I've really enjoyed it. And of course, the show gets a lot of comedic mileage from the fact that these are 2 old guys, and she is relatively young. So there's later in the series a lot of jokes about their texting. They text her, and they'll sign it from Charles Hayden Savage. She's like, you don't have to sign them. I know who you are. So good. So everybody, check out Only Murders in the Building on Hulu. It is almost the close of the season. I believe the season finale will be released this week. So check it out and contact us at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com and tell us what you thought, or find us on Twitter. Thank you everyone for listening. Please download, subscribe, and like our episodes if you enjoyed this podcast. If you really enjoyed this podcast, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/itchoosesyou.
Woohoo!
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyouPodcast@gmail.com.